Well, the truth is, we don't view cloud as one size fits all. There are in almost all industries, all sectors, whether it's public sector, and that includes government, healthcare, education, or private sector, whether it's banking or financial services, insurance, telecommunications, what have you. There will remain clear instances, clear scenarios where organizations want to control and own their infrastructure. They want to be able to touch and to feel and to see their data center. A very good example, I recently had a discussion with a CIO who also happened to be a general for a military in Asia. And the discussion that we had was around cloud computing, obviously. His point was very simple up front. Look, we are not willing to use a public cloud. We have intelligence data. It's a matter of national security. We have armed guards in front of our data center. That's not going to change. And I actually agree with that position. He shouldn't even consider changing that. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't attempt to leverage the characteristics of a public cloud within your data center. So things like virtualization and automation and management. And this is what we're seeing in many public sector organizations, whether it's government agencies, even healthcare, where patient records clearly are a major concern. They are still looking to invest in enabling characteristics or technology that help them, if not consume public cloud-based services, then as an IT organization, deliver services internally that take on the characteristics of a cloud. So they, in effect, are becoming service providers internally. So the issues of data security, data privacy when it comes to public sector, more than anything, will likely lead these organizations towards investing in private cloud enablement. But that is fundamentally a good thing. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There's immense value to be had in making your own internal IT organization more of a service provider, making them more accountable to the organization's needs. I suppose the key issue conceptually, there really are no downfalls. I mean, if you think about the characteristics of a cloud, it's better to provide more self-service type access, right, with less training required. It's better to be able to monitor usage and do some type of billing, even if it's internal billing, so that people pay for what they use. It's better to be able to provision resources and deprovision those resources as the organization requires. It's better to be able to leverage more of your capacity. So instead of leveraging on average 20 to 30% of your server capacity, you leverage 80 or 90%. These are all good things, but nothing is perfect, right? And there's always a downside. So the risks involve the approaches that we currently use, the technologies we currently use, and let's say the standards we currently use for enabling those positive characteristics. So for instance, virtualization is really the foundation for cloud computing, public or private. You need to virtualize your infrastructure so that you can increase the efficiency of usage, increase the percentage that you're using, the capacity. But as you're rolling out virtualization more broadly within the organization, you need to be able to manage it. If you don't manage virtualization effectively, that in itself can outweigh the benefits, the costs of managing what they call VM sprawl, just the proliferation of virtual machines. That in itself can overwhelm organizations who don't have the skills in place to do so. So it's like anything else, right? You need to invest along the lines of your capabilities. So for private cloud in particular, you need to understand that there are costs on the road or on the path towards enabling these fundamentally good characteristics. So VM sprawl, virtualization is the starting point. All of the issues around how you automate policies for provisioning and for management and for monitoring of systems and the actual very definition of those policies. Many IT organizations don't have a good grasp of what those policies should be, so they run the risk of implementing the wrong policies. And that in itself, again, can outweigh the benefits. So I would say the risks are all around implementation, but the characteristics in and of themselves are inherent goodness. Yeah, a very good example of that, particularly in the public sector, use healthcare. because there's two ways to look at cloud computing in healthcare. On the one hand, you can look at it from a slightly, let's say, cynical perspective, from the status quo perspective, which is to say that the patient records are critical to maintain, critical in terms of privacy and access, and therefore cloud-based computing doesn't make sense. It's a bad idea because I need to control that data. The flip side of that is that in the current scenario, you will have healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, whoever else, requiring access to patient records. So in a more traditional approach to IT, they have no choice but to carry that information around with them, right, on whatever type of device they're using, whatever it is. Now that's inherently insecure, right? Because you have that patient records, that patient data all over the place. It's not being controlled. Far more secure to centralize that data in one place, and so the healthcare providers are simply accessing it from a remote location, but they don't have it on their local device, whatever that device may be. So then the issue really becomes really flipping the concern on its head. As long as we're comfortable with the security of the network and the access point, we've actually turned the argument around to the point where it's far more secure in a healthcare scenario, as an example, to leverage a cloud-based approach. Whether it's public or private, that's a separate discussion, but a network-centric approach where the providers, the actual consumers of the information, of the patient records, don't have or run the risk of losing it because they don't actually have ownership of it. They're simply accessing it in a virtual sense, in a transitory sense. Once they no longer need it, it's gone from their device. So it's from that standpoint, that scenario is maybe the most extreme and clear example where cloud actually becomes, ironically enough, more secure.